seeing a pretty appalling series of events unfolding in parts of Syria and Iraq. Sunni Shia, there are other minorities like Alawite and Druze, and obviously Christian. And in the middle of this you have Israel, and then you have the Palestinian question, you have the Muslim Brotherhood, you have military dictatorship in effect reimposed in Egypt, you have a situation in Saudi where the ruling elite is somewhat far away from the great majority of the population, the Shia minority in the eastern region of Saudi, which rises up occasionally. You of course have Iran, a wonderful country, the regime that runs it, not so wonderful. Shia, strongly Shia. You have Iraq, which is essentially breaking up slowly but surely into three constituent parts. And you have a series of kingdoms created by us, the British, Sunni kingdoms, which we've benefited from in many ways, close relationships. The problem is that some individuals in those kingdoms have funded ISIS, and now we've got ISIS to deal with. And I've only just scratched the surface. In the middle of all of this, we have this long-running sore on the world, which is the Palestinian question, and Israel and Palestine. And we have responsibilities to Israel. It is a functioning democracy, and I recognise the state of Israel, would happily support the state of Israel, but I also recognise that the Palestinians have been badly treated by history over many, many decades and continue to be so. There is a problem also that the Arab countries also don't want to take responsibilities for the Palestinians as well. It's not just one-sided, it's much more complicated, as is always the case in the Middle East. But I do not believe that a two-state solution is at all tenable now. I mean, the appalling things that took place in Gaza over the summer. I called for a recall of Parliament so to discuss it. Okay? I called for a recall of Parliament to debate that, a recall of Parliament to debate MH17, and a recall of Parliament to debate ISIS. Okay? Publicly, went on Newsnight. I've been out that's front and centre. With regards to arms, trays and things, again there's a regional issue here because we sell arms not just to Israel, we've also been selling arms to UAE, to Saudi Arabia, we sell arms throughout the region. So we're very good at the arms trade, historically. We come back to the question of what are my children going to do in the future, but we have a defence industry that is very successful, has really high paid jobs. These are difficult decisions, is the point I'm trying to make. There are different aspects to these decisions. Where I get frustrated is that there doesn't seem to be policy towards the Middle East that I can discern. There isn't a regional policy. We don't actually know what we want to see. Next week I hear I might be asked to vote yes or no to support military engagement against ISIS. What should I vote? Yes or no? Yes. You know? I mean, some say yes, some say no. The point I'm trying to say is, I have to make a decision. Okay? I have to think about that, sir, as well as small regulations in TTIP. Okay? I have to make a decision. Now, that decision is part of a strategy, a broader strategy, I hope. A broader strategy of engagement. We may have to contribute, going back to international development, we might have to contribute towards a Marshall Plan for the Middle East in order to make it viable in the longer term, so that it's stable. Because we do get quite a lot of energy in that part of the region. We need to think about, is democracy in Western style going to work in the Middle East or not? Are we pro-Sunni? Are we pro-Shia? What about minorities? What about those Christians at the moment who are being murdered? I think the whole area requires the biggest brains in this country to work out what's in our best interests, and it needs the biggest brains in that region all put in a room and say, come on, you need to sort it out. We have a historic responsibility because we drew some of the borders. And we can see that some of those borders don't reflect tribal loyalties already. But because we drew those borders, we also have quite significant diplomatic contacts and a huge amount of knowledge of the region, which is invaluable. So I think we should play a part, and I think we should play a part militarily where it can be seen to be part of a broader coherent strategy. But I might be asked to make a decision next week, possibly, I don't know, but possibly, to commit or not. I didn't support it last year, sir, if you remember. I didn't support attacking Syria last year. 20 minutes one-on-one with the Prime Minister trying to persuade me otherwise, sir. you know. And so I'm capable of saying no, but there comes a point when you're confronted by individuals who think nothing of cutting off children's heads. I don't know if any of you have bothered to check online some of the imagery. I thought it was part of the role to look at it. I don't want to see those sort of images. I don't want to see children's heads on spikes in towns. Personally, I think those of us who enjoy democracy and freedom can worry about our children's economic futures. It seems quite good to have that opportunity, really, when if you can be in a part of the world where your children's heads are cut off just because they're Christian. All of this is difficult.
I appreciate that, but
it's, you know, it's complex.
It is, and you've done a quick précis around that area. But if Palestinians, or even those children you just mentioned, are being killed by British weapons, surely then it's the time to say we stop supplying them.
Yeah.
Until at such time as you can get, perhaps in some future date, you get a guarantee.
Yeah,
and that's what your colleagues were after.
There are a number of arguments around who's an appropriate person to sell arms to and who isn't. Freedom fighters, terrorists, you know the argument. It's not always straightforward. But I do think our arms sales to that region need review in broad terms. I do, as part of the strategy that I'm calling for, because it might not necessarily help the situation. I would argue though that quite a lot of the arms that are in the hands of Syrians and things have actually come, a lot of the munitions are coming out of Eastern Europe, because a lot of them are Russian, old Soviet Union type things, and they can only get the sort of bullets from, and there's a sort of there's a trade going on. So taking our arms out, I'm not sure it's going to make a huge difference. Actually, what we've got so is an ideological crisis, and one particular great religion in the world has got a crisis to deal with, and I think every Muslim in the world needs to recognise their responsibilities to deal with it, because it isn't an Islamic problem, because it is an interpretation of their holy book, and the literal translations can justify what we're seeing, as can some literal translations of the Bible justify some pretty abhorrent acts. We've had a reformation, and so I'm sort of sympathetic. I think you probably can detect that I am, but I think we're living through a period where there's some significance of plate tectonics. Things are moving around us, and we're just individuals trying to deal with it. And I just wish the British government, Britain, had a coherent policy to a region, because it is a regional challenge. It isn't just Israel and Gaza. Someone new. Yes. No.
I liked your observation earlier about, I guess, foresight and repercussions of decisions. I would like your perspective on all the housing development that's planned for the local area, and you knew it would come up. Yeah. And Crowthorne already can't cope. They've tried to park in one of the local car parks, there just isn't enough room. That's currently as it stands. Yeah. And we are soon to find 4,000 new houses in the area. What's your view on foresight and repercussions, and how are you going to help?
Housing is one of the key domestic issues. Whoever's in government, we've got a real problem at the moment in Britain because we don't have enough homes. It's one of the reasons that house prices have become so ludicrously high and unsustainable in terms of affordability. I read the other day that the factor between the median income of salary and median size of mortgage in Swansea, the gap is bigger in Swansea than it is in Washington DC. I don't know about you, but Swansea is not, with all due respect to being Welsh, this is not the epicentre of our economy. Okay, and in fact the biggest employer there is DVLA, over 10,000 people. Don't quite know what they're doing in view of the car discs finishing next month, but anyway. You can see the problem is we've got hugely expensive property. We've had sociological change where particularly women who used to stay living with their parents until they got married, not so long ago, are now rightly independent, going out, careers, wanting their flats, wanting their own independence and a place to live. We haven't got the housing stock to address that. And then on top of that, you also have the economic vibrancy of this area that we all celebrate. We hardly have any unemployment. hardly any youth unemployment, it's sort of 1% sort of range, it's down that sort of level, much, much better than the rest of the country. But with that comes significant pressure on the need for homes in the area. But the problem with building thousands and thousands of homes, and under the last government it was 26,000 homes were earmarked for Bracknell and Wokingham alone. 26,000. Now, we have somewhat mitigated that, but the local councils have a problem, because if they don't have a plan, then the developers will go off plan, and you'll end up with pockets of developments all over the place. So the councils have a plan, which has been TRL 1,000, 1,500 in the north end of Wokingham about as part of that, and there are two different councils, by the way, which I will come to. They have to have a plan to deal with what is expected of them, and also they have to recognise the economy. The problem is that the infrastructure, the roads particularly, were not designed for the number of homes we've already got. Okay, so we need probably maybe some additional roads, and then you get real problems with people saying, well, I don't want a road going across that field. And in addition to that, healthcare is not taken into consideration when it comes to planning homes, if you can believe it. The budgets for the two are not, there's no reflection on the healthcare budget for the number of people living in the area.
I'm surprised there isn't a doctor's surgery going into TRL.
Well, on that issue, I have tried to get the two local GP practices together on the same day to talk about it. It's like herding cats. Okay? And I am going to attempt to do it because Legal and General told me that they would make space for a health centre on that space as part of the development. But you've got to get the local practices, you know, don't get me started on how primary care works, you've got to get the other practices involved with that. But I can't get a meeting. So we had to cancel one today because they wouldn't move it, and I couldn't see doing it because I was in Westminster and they wouldn't do it first thing in the morning. It's been very, very difficult to try and get them on the same page. So, in conclusion, my response on housing is we don't have enough homes in the country. Okay, so we're going to have to build loads of homes. That's a fact. There's no getting away from it. We haven't got enough homes. All right? Some of it is driven by migration. I've already said what I think about that. But ultimately, for a variety of different reasons, we don't have enough homes to build them. And I'm hoping they're energy efficient homes. I just want to put that in, because the best thing this country could do at the moment is become less dependent on energy. I look at the world at the moment, Putin, Middle East. I don't want to be dependent on those regions. So we want to make these energy efficient homes as well. There's no avoiding it. What I want, though, is some recognition of the impact those developments have on local infrastructure. Because I don't
we know
think,
it's going ahead.
Yeah,
so it's
exactly. I mean, the TRL site's difficult because it's brownfield. It's the most developable brownfield site in Berkshire, apparently. So it's a difficult one to not have developed in planning terms. The problem locally, and this goes back to what I was saying about too much government, is we have the border of two councils that runs pretty much through the region of Crowthorne. And so they've made one decision in Wokingham Borough, and they've made one decision in Bracknell Forest Borough, and most of the homes, not most, a large number of the homes, have all been put next to each other. So TRL is Bracknell Forest, the ARC development at the bottom of Wokingham is Wokingham Borough. And there are a couple of others, Broadmoor being another one. Again, this to me points towards a rationalisation of the number of councils in Berkshire, so that you get them looking at a greater region, so that you don't have that situation. But don't hold your breath. It's difficult reconfiguring local government, trust me.
And I appreciate all your comments. Is there anything with regards to actually going to help Crowthorne manage? Because I know there's going to be another road put in for Wokingham, but we can't, just getting around the village. Yeah. I mean, we can't magic new roads through the centre of Crowthorne. No, I agree. I don't have any control over the planning, it's the first thing. But I do have I have an opportunity, however you want to describe it, to argue for the services to be there to look for the people that are coming. And particularly around healthcare, the GP surgeries are restricted in their size already in Crowthorne. And so we're going to be adding in another couple of thousand, 3,000-4,000 people, whatever it is, who are going to be looking after, who's going to be looking after them. So that's what I've concentrated on doing. And I've also lobbied hard, Bracknell Forest Council, that there's actually a division between the development and Bracknell, because I don't want it to just all merge into one. So on the TRL side, I've asked for there to be a break as best I can. The difficulty is that the plans aren't yet fixed on where that development's going to be and where those trees are going to be, as far as I know. Again, this is not my area,
in terms of their area of responsibility. All I can do is promise you that if I climb the slippery pole, that if when we get to deal with this housing challenge, whoever's in power, they're going to have to deal with this in the next 5 to 10 years, that a greater reflection of impact upon infrastructure is. So I don't think it's been the gift of councils to really necessarily assess that, particularly when healthcare doesn't figure. And also, when we're getting back to devolution again, we get less money around here, particularly working in borough. They get less money per head than most councils in the country. And it's just, not acceptable. Once I'm dealing with it.
Could you confirm the role of Bracknell Forest Council's environmental health department in terms of intervention? Say, for instance, a major property is damaging damage to your property.
Can you write to me about it?
I have. I didn't want to go into
Okay.
specifics.
If it's social housing responsibility, if it's Bracknell Forest Homes,
It's a private mortgage property.
private mortgage property, next door is,
It's an upstairs, I live in the old police station.
yes,
I don't be aware,
Yeah.
but the upstairs property has been damaging my property for 5 years, since 2009.
Yeah.
I've had 3 insurance claims,
yeah,
and that's why it's not another claim.
Yeah.
Environmental health were involved,
yes,
and then basically they told me that they shouldn't be involved in another claim. However, I've already had 3 claims closed. However, before it could be...
okay. You do me a favour and email me tomorrow so that I get your name out and I will draw out your case. Forgive me, but
No, I appreciate
we have quite a large number and I'm not remembering this particular case. But if you email me in the morning, I'll get my staff to look at it again. Basically, the Environmental Health Department basically said it's not our problem. So they're just washing their hands of it. Is that the...
More or less they're telling it's another claim. However, if you do read into specifics, I'm sure that you'll agree it's not. Environmental health are involved.
Yeah.
Stated that he could 100% help me put the CEO is
Fine.
otherwise.
Okay, I'll look at it and I'll get back to you. Okay, just email me tomorrow to the email address you must be using already, and just say it spoke to me last night, and then my office will go, yes, it's this one. And I'll speak to them in the morning. Someone new, jump there.
Right. Just another local problem I just wanted to raise and interested in your view on it is that since the 25th of August, Heathrow has changed its flight plans to directly fly over the top of Crowthorne. Just interested in your views and whether or not there's anything to be done to try and stop it from going ahead in the future.
The decision wasn't made on the 25th of August. The decision on them being able to use that flight approach was made about 2011, and at the time I had some correspondence. I've been getting correspondence in the last couple of weeks, as has my colleague in Windsor, about it, and I've been sending back a copy of the letter I got from the Minister in 2011. These are trial routes in, and they're not fixed in stone at all, but they're trial routes. Most of the nighttime flying is coming in from the east, I'm told, because planes land into westerly prevailing wind. I'm aware of this, trust me, there's been correspondence on it, but it's not a fixed thing. They're trying different routes.
There's nothing about the arrival planes route changing. It's all about the takeoff. I spoke to them today and they said the arrivals, as far as they're aware, has not changed. And without a shadow of a doubt, in the last couple of weeks, we're getting a plane every 2 to 3 minutes.
It's horrendous.
Right over.
Horrendous.
Okay.
I've never known it 15 years.
Yeah, sure. I know something's happening because my Windsor colleague is getting huge amounts of correspondence because he's closer to Heathrow, so we're going to get even more noise. As a result, he's organising with Heathrow a public meeting, which is in Ascot. Is it next week or is it?
Yeah, the race course, isn't it?
Yeah, there is a public meeting taking place with Heathrow, which I encourage you to attend. I've been
Could
told,
you attend that?
It depends what the date is. Next week, it's next week, no. I can't attend next week. But I don't know the date. I know that there's a meeting taking place. I don't know really. October the 13th, which is, that's a Monday, isn't it? The problem is I'm whipped on that night to vote in Westminster. It's a Monday night.
It's so bad. Can I just say it's so bad that one of the teachers at Edgebarrow had to stop mid-class and say, wait a minute, let the plane go over and then continue her A-level class. I mean, that's how bad it is. As well as young mums, well, families, everybody, children being woken up at 5 in the morning. I mean, this is changing our ability to have a social way to live in Crowthorne. I mean, it's horrendous.
Yeah. Okay, all right, I hear it. So it's take-off?
No.
All day, all day.
It's a right.
Taking around all of the counties and coming through Crowthorne and Sandhurst every time. Every single one of our international flights is going that way.
Every 3 minutes. It's horrendous.
Okay, all right. Let me look at it again. I was told that it was a ministerial decision in 2011 to allow them to do it on a temporary basis to trial something. Okay, that's what. Yeah, let me look at it again. I will look at it again and I'll get back to you. If I can attend on the 13th of October, I will do. But I don't know whether I'm whipped or not for a vote.
I'm fairly sure the counties will experience the same. Forest as well. When I cycle around Swindon 3 times a week, there's probably about 30 seconds when you don't hear a plane.
Yeah, okay.
That's never been like that.
All right.
No,
I know it hasn't.
Doctor, can I just ask, what is your recommendation? I mean, so potentially we attend the meeting, but if it's a trial, isn't it now when we should...
Well, that's what I thought it was a trial period. They were given the permission to try different routes out of Heathrow, is my understanding, and that they've started the trial on this route since August 25th.
But if we don't make a fuss, won't that be January when the trial finishes? They'll say, oh great, okay, that was fairly successful.
No, I don't think they're going to get a fairly successful thing for this. I mean, we have a problem longer term with the approach that we all take to the siting of Heathrow and its expansion, which I think everybody should start thinking about, because I suspect Heathrow will be cited as the one that gets expanded. And that, because I think it's for a whole reason I could go into, but I think that's what's coming. Now, what I'm interested to know is about this particular flight path and how many people it's impacting. Whichever way we try to deal with this, there is going to be some impact if Heathrow is expanded. The issue, though, is what level of impact and whether it can be mitigated and shared all around. I had somebody come to see me the other day who submitted a plan to the Howard Davies Commission, which involves the expansion of Heathrow, but it had lots of different approaches that were being rotated on different days of the week. And I thought this made a lot of sense, which is why I'm going to be hosting this. They're going to be putting this plan to parliamentarians in a few months' time, and I'm going to formally host it. I personally want to see the expansion of Heathrow because I think our economy around here is positive. I mean, it's about 5,500 to 6,000 people in the constituents work at Gatwick or at Heathrow.
Yeah, I mean, this is not. I don't think this is
So
a NIMBY.
No, I know it's not.
Job.
No.
But you know, we're waking up at 5 in the morning.
No, I'm just putting it out there because I know this is adversely impacting because we detected it in the mailbag. So we need to find routes and approaches that are as acceptable as possible. I'm just being honest with you that we have this challenge in the next 5 to 10 years of deciding whether we support as a community Heathrow expansion or not, because I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that's going to be the one where they tick the box and expand. But I will get back to you in terms of the details of this, because I clearly misunderstood. I thought it was something which was trialling and that it was, this wasn't a new decision. But it sounds like you're getting impacted much more than I'd realised. So
yeah, we sort of, there's rumours that, you know, on the 28th of January when it finishes, if people haven't kicked up enough stink, they'll just carry on.
It's just fait accompli, so then we're stuck with it forever.
You know, and there was very little, you know, I knew nothing about it.
I don't know,
nothing in the press.
Yeah, I will contact tomorrow Heathrow. They've been all over me like a rash, because I came out publicly supportive of Heathrow expansion. Or maybe the payback is that they let me off and go ahead and do things without actually instructing that they're coming. Because if they'd told me what they were doing here and given me prior warning this was going to happen, which incidentally I don't think they did, life would have been a bit easier because people could have gone, right, okay, we're going to have a period where it's going to be a bit unpleasant, noisy, whatever. This is the mechanism by which we feed in what we think. But it seems like this was just happened, and I don't think that was acceptable. So leave it with me, and I'll speak to them tomorrow.
What's the best way of us then reconnecting with you? You know, you said, well, you'll update. I've never been to one of these before, so...
Just email me tomorrow.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
If you email me tomorrow, everybody who, on a particular issue, my office is set up to code issues.
Oh, great.
So, for instance, the most letters I've ever received, which is our letters, is on air passenger duty. Because everybody who was employed by airlines and everything else were encouraged to write to their MPs. That's how we know how many people live in the area who work at the airports. So if you ring up, you will be put in the aircraft noise pile, and then what I'm going to probably do is compose a letter and then write to everybody who's contacted me so that not only they get it, but they also can disseminate it to their friends and family.
Great. Thank you.
Can I just say though, we're talking about Heathrow Airport, if it expands,
Yeah.
the reality is it's expanding, it's well built up. I mean, I used to live by Heathrow
Yeah.
Airport, it's very well built up.
Yeah.
They're going to have to, planes are going to have to fly all over. Why would we be exempt? And if they would go somewhere else, surely, in fairness, they would come over.
No, I don't think we'd be exempt, but I suspect they may put in a rota of Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. Which is what this plan that was shown to me, which is not the plan, it's just one of the ones that's been submitted, extends the runway. Well, the longest runway there is 4.5 kilometres. The plan is to make it 6.5 to 7 kilometres and therefore create 2 runways, because most modern planes now need just over 3 kilometres to land on. And so that extension takes it across the M25 towards Poyle, if you know your geography. Okay, so the M25 is at the top, and the runway is on top. That actually brings the runway closer to Berkshire, obviously, because it actually enters Berkshire, I think, on the map. His plan is a former Concorde pilot. He had a series of lines of different approaches that could be taken at different times of the day. The other thing to bear in mind is, and he was explaining to me that some pilots don't do this, but anybody who's a pilot in here will know you can glide approach, which is a more steep approach to an airport, and you don't use the engines. At the moment, a lot of them come in powering their engines, making the noise. You can actually glide approach, which is what they're now encouraging to be the approach into Heathrow. So, and on top of that, modern planes now have a footprint that's significantly smaller in terms of their noise. You might not think it at the moment, but modern planes, though I suspect some of the louder noises of the older planes, the more modern planes now are much quieter, and so there are ways of mitigating it. I'm just being honest with you that I suspect if they expand it, there will be some impact. But what I'm arguing for is that for that to be mitigated and shared around, because ultimately we need a hub airport as a nation, I would argue. It just happens they built it in Hounslow. I sort of wish they'd built it somewhere else, but that's where they built it.
2 years ago I had this debate in Bracknell. We were discussing the high-speed rail and discussing the airport. And the chap there said, yes, well, in 5 to 10 years, you know, we have to build it. Okay, you just said that this morning, this evening. You know, in 5 to 10 years, you have to build it. I was suggesting then, and I suggest now, then there will not be a problem. Because our competitors in Europe are busy building. Yeah. I'm looking at it, we're thinking around. So that we won't need an extra runway because we're losing traffic.
No, I mean, you're right that Schiphol and Charles de Gaulle and Frankfurt have been growing, and the number of slots from those airports, particularly to China, are greater, and the argument goes, therefore, the economy is better because of that, etc., etc. And we have a long and rich history of cock-up when it comes to major infrastructure projects in terms of getting things done. Terminal 5, 8 years to get planning permission. We already need Terminal 6. So I agree with you, there isn't, you know, but we are getting better. Crossrail, for instance, is going to come on budget, on time. I don't know if you watched that TV programme, remarkable engineering project. So I like to think, Gerald, that we're going to be better in the future. That's why I'm actually persuaded of this particular plan, because it adds an extra runway, but there is scope to add another one if it's thought, well, why don't we just get on with it and do it in one go. We don't necessarily foresee needing that, And there are arguments around, are we going to be travelling more in the future or not? One of the reasons I didn't support HS2 was I'm not convinced that we're necessarily going to be travelling domestically more in the future. I think a lot of us, I'm looking at the younger faces in the audience, are going to be looking after our elderly in the future because the state can't afford to do it because of an aging society. So therefore we're more likely to live and work closer to our parents and grandparents. So therefore why are we going to be getting on a train? So we need to design, going back to the housing, we need to start thinking about the type of homes we're building and allowing for families to be living in the same area. It's almost like going back in time. There are rumours of a potential retirement village being built in this part of the world. Okay, this seems to be the way we're going here. And so why are we building fast trains? Also, why are we building fast trains when in fact most of us can work, spend a lot of time staring at a screen? Doesn't really make any difference whether I arrive in Birmingham 15 minutes earlier or not. If I've got 15 minutes more emails to do, what difference does it make? What difference I want to see is the fact that my Wi-Fi works and it's really fast. Not that the train goes fast. I want to be able to communicate quick, not travel quick. And that's one of the reasons I didn't support that rather grandiose project. But I'm hopeful that we can do big projects better. Yeah.
I want to ask something really
Sure.
something. Why is it the Tory dog gets wagged by the Liberal tail in terms of like bringing this ridiculous free school meal for every child and welfare parents till age 7, and they want to extend the daycare to age 11? Should the state be feeding our children, or should parents be responsible?
I agree.
It can't be afforded.
I agree, absolute nonsense, and it's just welfare by another means. And you know, we spend almost £1 billion a day on health and welfare in this country. You know, when are we going to wake up? You know, you want more money for apprenticeships, £1 billion a day on health and welfare. You know,
and I'm a recipient of that stuff.
You know,
and had I not been, I would
yeah.
be begging in the streets of
Do you know what, sir? I would want to live in a society where you receive that welfare. But you're not telling me that £250 billion a year is needed to treat everybody's welfare needs in this country.
I'm saying that a safety net needs to be insured, and your capacity of ensuring that people donate through charity for essential need is a pretty disgusting.
Well, actually, I quite like the idea.
On a welfare state that has brought up most of this audience.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would argue, sir, actually, that I quite hanker after a time where communities, local churches and everybody else looked after people in need. And this idea that somehow we need to turn to some sort of socialist state to do it actually reflects, I think, badly on us as a generation in terms of where we think care should be delivered and who should be responsible for it. But I'm not actually advocating scrapping the welfare budget, so those words didn't pass my lips. I'm just suggesting to you that spending upwards of £1 billion a day on health and welfare, around 40% of the nation of public expenditure, then people say to me, well, why can't we afford apprenticeship schemes? Why can't we afford more defence of our nation? Why can't we afford lots of different things? And I say, well, the problem we've got is we're spending around 40% of national wealth on it. And this is before the 70th birthday of the first baby boomer next year. We know we have a cohort of people born between 45 and 1955, 1960, the baby boomer generation, through no fault of their own, who are ageing. So we're going into this period with £1.5 trillion worth of debt, around £2 trillion worth of public sector pensions liabilities we can't meet, okay, and we're spending about £1 million a day on health and welfare. You do the maths. We've got a diminishing number of people in work, and we're having to compete. Our young are having to compete, not just with somebody down the road in Sandhurst, having to compete with somebody down the road in Shanghai. In that situation,
you support Trident, which spend billions and billions of pounds of the taxpayers' money. So obviously you think Trident missiles this.
Well, okay, it's about £25 billion, okay, which is not an insignificant amount of money,
no.
except, okay, it's not a significant part of 700 billion, which is our annual spend, and it's a nuclear deterrent for 30 years. So realistically, the idea of scrapping nuclear weapons, which is a position that one can take, somehow that's going to make all of our finances healthier. 25 billion 1,400 million is our current debt and counting. Now, there's an argument about why do we have a nuclear weapon if we're not going to use it? Why are we a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council? With that comes significant responsibilities. But I would leave with you the sense of how I see this century going at the moment. The last century was about the defence of democracy and liberty. Millions of people gave their lives in the defence of those two principles. This century seems to be about placating autocrats, doing business with China, doing business with Russia, not democracy, sir.
This century, sir, is about something that this lady mentioned, and you, as an MP, were totally unaware of, that will affect all our lives, and a significant number of the people in this audience clapped your ignorance of that. Now that I find
I think what they were recognising, sir, is that guess what? I don't have the brain capacity to be an expert on everything. And there's plenty of things that I have to know about. And I do my very best to know about.
We will try and ensure you continue to do so.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
You are aware of the CCIP, don't
Yeah.
you? You have
Yes.
opinions about it.
Yes.
You're not ignorant of it, you
No.
just don't know.
I didn't know the detail.
It's
Yes.
instructive
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
How do you feel in general about it?
I'm not sure that it's actually going to come off as a negotiation, because there are issues around healthcare. Some people have problems with companies having access to healthcare markets. There are issues around agricultural subsidy, a significant agricultural subsidy on both sides of the pond. I think in theory, if we could have an open market, it would be broadly good for us that we could participate in that market. But again, and just the complexity of this is not a level playing field. And I think that, and it also buys into this sort of blockist view of the world. I'm not convinced this is necessarily in our interests. I think that Britain needs to get its house in order. And I think in order to do that, and also to politically deliberate, so that people aren't anxious about the futures of their children and life, I think we need to perhaps regroup a bit. And that's why I think we need to negotiate with you in a tough way, and why I think we perhaps need to look outward in terms of who we do business with. Why haven't we got free trade arrangements with India, Mexico? These economies are growing. We can't actually negotiate free trade with them because of ownership of another organisation. I don't know. It doesn't seem right to me. But I'm going to go away and read that now. More than my life's worth not to. I'll come in, yes.
I'm just going back to a bit of a round robin debate there about how much money we spend on welfare.
Yeah.
And I haven't got any figures with me, so, but is it not correct that we are the 6th richest country in the world? If we can't afford, as the 6th richest country in the world, to look after our old people and disabled people, etc., then surely we are not the 6th richest country in the world. Or have I got that wrong?
It depends how you value, how you measure wealth. Okay, per capita, size of economy. There's lots of different ways of measuring it. We're not as rich as Norway in any shape or form. Norway's very wealthy because per capita they've got more money, they've got more savings. And guess what? They charge you to see the doctor. Just throw that one in, just to give you some sense of how things can be in different countries. But yes, I agree with you. We should have enough wealth to go around so that people don't live in poverty and aren't socially isolated, of course. But my argument is that if the state is essentially approaching going bust because it's constantly borrowing, we're going to need to find different ways of delivering care to needy people. And I do not accept that all care should be delivered by the state. Philosophically, I think that the Care Centre, for example, in Bracknell, does fantastic work in the community, delivering care and attention to needy people in distress. I actually celebrate the fact that there are people in this community who give up time to go and deliver that care. I don't think necessarily that the state should always be the way in which we care for vulnerable people. And I just don't think the state can afford to in the way that it's currently constructed. We could argue about how much money we spend on governance, we could argue about how much money we spend on administration, like 10,000 people being employed processing our car tax, etc., etc., etc. But ultimately, I do think that each and every one of us have responsibilities to our families and our immediate friends and neighbours. And I think the problem is over the last few decades, we've somewhat looked the other way and said that's the state's, that's the government's responsibility, that's the council's responsibility. And I think increasingly in the future, we should all perhaps look at ourselves and think, do you know what, I've got to spare a couple of hours, I'm going to go and do that for somebody. Because that's the type of society I want to live in.
I don't think that will happen though, because society is becoming, so insular. Each person is becoming so much more insular. The young person, young people spend so much time on the screen, they find difficulty in actually speaking to other people.
Sure.
If you say, would you like to go to the bank to get your money? Oh no, be scared silly. I'll go to the hole in the wall. And I think, sorry, can I just say, I'm slightly worried about your position on social welfare, because if you went back to the Victorian times, before there was safety nets, you're making people who are disadvantaged beggars. They have to beg for charity. And what I would like in society, that everyone is on a level. And that's what social welfare does. It gives everyone...
Well, everybody has the same amount of money, is that what you're saying?
No, gosh, I'm not. No, I'm just saying, I don't want people who are disadvantaged to have to rely on someone saying, oh, I'll give you £1. That is political.
But I didn't, first of all, I didn't say go back to Victorian times.
No, you said
before. Well, in 1914, the percentage of GDP spent on the state was about 12%. Okay, at that point, we'd already introduced pensions. Okay, how on earth have we got to 48%? Think about it. I clearly don't want to go back to a time with poorhouses and workhouses and everything else. I mean, it's like the statement of the obvious. But I do think that the size of the state's got too large, and that we've ended up in a society which is much more selfish as a consequence. Because it's like, well, I've already paid my tax, let them get on with it, let that person deal with this. With regards to young people, yes, there is a problem with the atomisation of society because of the internet, smartphones and the like. But I don't think young people are bad people. I think young people actually, I think young people actually are just the same sort of human beings as we all are. But they've grown up in a society which is sort of taught them to be like that. It's sort of, that's how life has become. I would suggest it is deliverable, but as a group of people, as a population, we've got to decide we want to have a country like that. We've got to decide we're going to do it. And there will be some tough decisions along the way to achieve
You're
that.
happy for people to sell arms. I mean, what message? You were saying that you would like to scrap overseas development.
Yes.
Well,
I didn't
a lot of that money
Yeah.
goes to repair the damage that our selling arms to these countries has produced.
Yeah.
So it's joined up thinking, really.
No, please don't.
The French would or the Russians.
Yeah, please don't misquote me. The point I was trying to say is that we have a very successful defence industry which employs a large number of people in this country. If we're going to get out of the game, we're going to stop doing it. That's a position to take. But what are we going to do? And I'm just saying have that debate, have that discussion. I'm not happy about selling arms to anyone in particular. But at the moment, that's what one of our initiatives that's very successful does. I think we should have greater thought about the impact of some of the countries that we sell arms to. To get out of the arms trade, yeah, but that has a significant impact on certain parts of the country, Lancashire,